Welcome to our channel, all friends. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to stay update for new videos. Thanks. Let's start new video. It was time for my matriculation exams. In the evening, I would go to the academy to prepare for the exams. When my mother was alive, she would personally help me with my studies. But after her passing, I had to get myself enrolled in an academy. My father didn't have time, and my aunt, who was even 1 year younger than me, had stopped studying after 8th grade. My mother had often told her to continue her education, saying that education is very important for women, but my aunt had ignored all of my mother's advice. She had abandoned her education and followed her own way. Today, when I came home, I was a little late, but I became quite worried when I saw that many people from the neighborhood were gathered in the house, speaking loudly. As soon as they saw me, they fell silent. I couldn't understand why they were there or what they were discussing with my father. What was the need for all this noise? When I asked my father about it, he angrily told me to go to my room, saying that he would talk to them. After a little while, those people left. Once they were gone, I asked my aunt about what had happened, but looking at her face, I felt as if she had been crying. However, she didn't answer me directly and dismissed me by saying that my father had spoken to them. She didn't know much more about it, and despite my repeated questioning, she refused to tell me any details. From the way she looked, it seemed like she was hiding something from me. She wasn't giving me a clear answer, but I couldn't insist on asking more, so I quietly went back to my room. As the days passed and my exams got closer, my anxiety grew. I kept thinking about how I had to top the exams, how I had to get the highest marks. My mother had always wished for me to pursue higher education, and my father had made it clear that if I didn't get good marks, he would be very upset with me. To ensure I did well, my father had enrolled me in the city's most expensive academy. That's why, even after coming home, I would study late into the night, sometimes making tea to keep myself awake and avoid falling asleep. I had to fulfill my late mother's dream and become a successful person by getting a good education. One night, while I was in the kitchen making tea, I noticed that the light in my father's room was on, and I could hear voices coming from inside. I shook my head and dismissed it because my father often stayed up late, working on office tasks and sometimes talking to his staff. It didn't seem like anything unusual. However, as I was returning to my room with the tea, I was surprised to see my aunt leaving my father's room and heading to her own. I quickly hid behind the wall. After my aunt had gone to her room, I came out again. It was around 2 a.m. when I checked the time. I couldn't help but wonder why my aunt had been in my father's room at that hour and what she had been doing there. Only my aunt could answer that. Then as I got busy with my studies, I forgot about that incident. However, I often noticed that after my father came home, my aunt would start hovering around him. Sometimes she would take tea to his room, and other times she would find some other excuse to go there and spend a significant amount of time with him. Watching this always gave me an unsettling feeling. After that night, the neighbors never came to our house, making a scene again. However, I started noticing that the boys in the neighborhood would laugh in a strange way whenever they saw me. Sometimes they would pass by making suggestive gestures. I was utterly confused. What was going on? Around the same time, my aunt's health began to deteriorate frequently. My father hired a maid to take care of her and also to manage other household chores. Whenever I looked at my father now, he seemed happier than ever. There was a constant smile on his face. The anger that used to be a prominent part of his personality had completely disappeared. This drastic change in his demeanor deeply shocked me. Even my mother had never seen this side of him. He had always been a strict and short-tempered man around her. I was bewildered. Why had my father, who was always so irritable, suddenly become so cheerful? The boys in the neighborhood had also started teasing me. They would ask, "So what name have you chosen for your new little brother?" Or say things like, "We heard there's going to be a new guest in your house soon." Their words left me utterly speechless. I couldn't understand why they were making such disgusting jokes at my expense. Why was I their target when I barely even interacted with them? I was a reserved person who stayed in his own world. And then it didn't take me long to figure out the truth. My father was having an affair with my aunt. They were engaged in a shameful relationship, turning their nights into moments of pleasure. And all this was happening right under my nose while I remained unaware. Meanwhile, the entire neighborhood seemed to know about it. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt one night when, as usual, I went to the kitchen to make tea. Once again, I heard voices coming from my father's room. I had seen my aunt leaving his room many times before, but that night, I decided to see for myself what was truly happening. I moved towards the window and peeked inside. What I saw made the ground slip from beneath my feet. All barriers of modesty had been broken between my father and my aunt. The sight before me was so shameful that I wanted the earth to swallow me whole. They were lost in each other, completely unaware of their surroundings. They had no idea that I had just witnessed everything. It was unbearable. Back in my room, I clutched my head in both hands. The same horrific image kept flashing before my eyes. I was furious at my aunt. How could she do this? She was too young to be involved in something like this. And my father, he was old enough to be her guardian, not her partner. He shouldn't have done this. No wonder the people in the neighborhood had been gossiping. I tried to study, but every time I opened my books, the same shameful scene played in my mind. My aunt's face, her beauty. It wouldn't leave my thoughts. I desperately tried to distract myself, but I failed every time. Eventually, exhausted, I closed my book and lay down. But the moment I shut my eyes, the same image appeared before me again. My mind was in chaos. The images of father and aunt haunted me, twisting my thoughts. A dangerous desire took root. If aunt could do such things with father, why not with me? I was young, handsome, and full of restless energy. The fire of youth burned within me, and after what I had witnessed, controlling my emotions became impossible. I began watching for opportunities, finding excuse to touch aunt, to test her reactions. At first, she would look at me in surprise, then shake her head and walk away. But when I grew bolder, she snapped at me angrily. "If you ever dare to touch me again, I'll tell your father. Have you no shame? Do you even realize what our relationship is?" But I was beyond reason. "If you can do this with father, why not with me?" I whispered, my voice trembling with desperation. "I'm younger than him. I can make you happier. Come to my room tonight. I'll be waiting." Her eyes widened in shock. She had never expected this from me. "You've lost your mind," she hissed. "Whatever you're thinking, forget it. If your father finds out, you know what will happen." But I didn't care anymore. I stormed back to my room, my books lying forgotten. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't focus. My mind was consumed by one thought. I wouldn't find peace until I had what I wanted. That night, after the house fell silent, I crept out of my room and slipped into Aunt's. She was asleep, her breathing slow and steady. My heart pounded as I moved closer, reaching out to touch her. I was just a child when I first saw her, a girl a year younger than me. When I asked Mother who she was, she said, "This is your aunt." At the time, I didn't understand what that meant. As I grew older, I learned she was Mother's cousin, the daughter of her maternal uncle. After her parents died, there was no one left to care for her, so Mother brought her home. She went to school with me, but unlike me, she had no interest in studies. Mother would scold her constantly. "Kishmala, why don't you ever finish your homework? Your teachers complain about you every day." But Kishmala would just shrug. "I can't remember anything. It's not my fault." She preferred household chores over books, and often I caught her crying in secret, missing her parents. Mother would comfort her, saying, "Morty, why are you crying? As long as I'm here, you lack nothing. I'm your mother and father now." For a while, Kishmala would calm down, but the tears always returned. Now, standing over her sleeping form, I hesitated. The memories of her as that lonely little girl clashed with the woman she had become, the woman who had betrayed Mother's trust. My hand trembled. I used to be very angry at Kashmala because she had taken away my parents' love. They cared for her more than they cared for me. As a child, she would often complain about me, whether true or false, just to get me scolded. Because of this, we never got along. We were always at odds with each other. I wished I could get rid of her somehow. Then after 8th grade, she refused to continue her studies. My mother was furious and tried to persuade her, but Kashmala didn't change her mind. She would say, "I can't study, nothing stays in my mind. What's the point of studying when I can't learn anything?" Every day at school, my teachers scold me in front of everyone. I would rather not go to school at all. Since her heart was not in it, my mother eventually gave up and let her be. Staying at home made Kashmala happy, especially because she helped my mother with household chores. My mother appreciated this but still worried about her future. She often thought about how society prefers educated girls for marriage, and Kashmala's refusal to study might make it difficult for her to find a good match. Years passed, and then, by the grace of God, my mother was blessed again. Our family was expecting a new member. I was overjoyed at the news. I had always wished for a little brother, someone I could play with and love unconditionally. Unlike Kashmala, with whom I had spent all my time arguing, this new family member would be different. Since we were close in age, Kashmala and I had never really gotten along. She would often snitch on me, but this time, I was eagerly looking forward to having someone younger than me to cherish. But I had no idea that this happiness would soon turn into a devastating tragedy. The day my mother was taken to the hospital, I was at school. My father was with her, and the doctors assured him that everything was normal. There were no complications, and the delivery would be smooth. However, something went wrong. Suddenly, my mother's health deteriorated. Not only did we lose the baby, but my mother also lost her life. When I returned from school that day, I was met with the most heartbreaking news of my life. My mother's lifeless body lay before me. I threw my school bag aside and collapsed beside her, crying uncontrollably. Kashmala pulled me into her embrace and sobbed, saying, "Baji has left us forever. Now who will listen to my heart's worries? Who will take care of me?" Even after my mother's burial, I couldn't stop crying. I wept until I lost consciousness. It took me 2 days to regain my senses, and as soon as I woke up, I started calling out for my mother again. My father and Kashmala comforted me. My father promised, "I will be both your mother and father. I will never let you feel her absence." It took me a long time to cope with my grief, but my mother's memories haunted me every moment. Kashmala took over all the household responsibilities. Even when my mother was alive, she had helped manage the house, but now she carried the full burden. From cleaning to cooking, Kashmala did everything exceptionally well. Everything I needed was always ready on time. Every night, just like my mother used to, she would leave a glass of milk in my room before going to bed. She took care of me to the best of her ability, but no one could ever replace my mother. No matter how much she tried, the absence of my mother could never truly be filled. I respected her, and I had a soft corner for her in my heart. But after seeing her with my father in that state, my thoughts about her changed. I started looking at her differently. I wanted her to share my bed the same way she did with my father. That's why I sneaked into her room late one night. Just as I entered, the lights suddenly turned on. When I turned around, I saw my father standing there looking at me with shocked eyes. Kashmala also woke up and was stunned to see both of us in her room. My father, with anger in his voice, asked, "What are you doing here?" I stammered and quickly made up an excuse. I had a headache, so I came to get medicine from Kala. Even though I wanted to, I couldn't bring myself to ask him what he was doing there. I was just grateful that Kashmala didn't say anything about me to my father. If she had, I didn't know what he would have done to me. I was angry at my father too. If he couldn't control his desires, why didn't he just remarry? Why did he have to do this with a girl young enough to be his daughter? As I walked back to my room, my desire for Kashmala only grew stronger. But after that incident, I never got another opportunity. Kashmala had become much more cautious. She started locking her room at night. Watching her do this made me furious. I often thought to myself, if she could do it with my father, why not with me? And then one day I finally got my chance. I tried to force myself on her, but suddenly my father appeared. He beat me mercilessly, thrashing me like I was nothing. He shouted, "Aren't you ashamed of yourself? Don't you understand the sanctity of relationships? She is your aunt. How could you even think of something like this? Do you realize how disgusting this is?" He kept hitting me, yelling at me. I couldn't take it anymore. In frustration, I shouted back, "Then what were you thinking when you did it? She is as young as your children. Didn't you feel ashamed while doing the same thing?" His face went pale. His eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't believe I had said those words to him. And honestly, even I couldn't believe that he had done such a thing, or that I had confronted him about it. Without another word, I got up and went to my room. I knew I could never face him again. After that, I pushed all these thoughts aside and focused entirely on my studies. I drowned myself in my exam preparations, choosing to ignore my father and Kashmala completely. Whatever they were doing and why they were doing it no longer mattered to me. In fact, I had started seeing my father as my enemy. It felt as if I had no connection with him anymore. I had completely stopped talking to both of them. I spent most of my time studying, and even when I was at home, I never left my room. If I went out with my friends, I would come back and go straight to my room. Now that my exams were over, I had nothing to keep me busy. One day, my father called me into his room. Kashmala was also there. My father said, "I was waiting for your exams to be over. I wanted to tell you something, but I didn't want to disturb you during your studies. I felt that you might become mentally disturbed, and I didn't want to stress you out." Hearing his words, I rolled my eyes. What did he care about my worries anyway? But the way he was speaking made me curious. What could be so important? Then he finally said, "Actually, I have married Kashmala. She is now my wife. I kept this from you because I wanted to tell you after your exams. I know that accepting someone else in your mother's place is never easy. And for you, accepting Kashmala as your mother would be even harder." Hearing this, my jaw dropped in shock. "But why did you do this?" I asked. "If you had to remarry, you could have married someone older. Why Kashmala?" He sighed and said, "People in the neighborhood and our relatives had started talking. They said that Kashmala couldn't live with us in the same house because she was not related to us, and then I made a mistake. I lost control and committed a sin. I realized that if I didn't marry her, her life would be ruined. That's why I decided to make her my wife. And the things you saw that day," he continued, "were completely valid between a husband and wife. Forget about it and remove all the wrong thoughts you have about me. We are married and we have rights over each other." I felt ashamed of myself. I had misjudged my father so badly. I should have spoken to him before assuming the worst. He was right. It wasn't easy to accept Kashmala as my mother. And now I felt even more ashamed knowing that she was my stepmother, and yet I had tried to do something so terrible to her. The guilt was eating me alive. I couldn't even look at Kashmala anymore. Sensing my discomfort, she spoke to me. "You don't need to feel ashamed," she said. "I have already forgotten everything that happened that day. You should forget it too. And from now on, nothing like that should ever happen again." Hearing this, I forced a smile. There was no point in holding on to the past anymore. A while later, when Kashmala gave birth to a child, my life became even more difficult. The boys in the neighborhood would constantly taunt me. They made my life miserable. I finally told my father, "I can't live here anymore. I feel ashamed every time I step outside." Understanding my pain, my father sold the house. We moved to a new place where no one knew us, where no one could mock me or humiliate me anymore.